Thank you very much, and let me thank UC Riverside, the Alliance for Immigration Reform, for your kind invitation. Joseph and Victoria, I'm sorry I can't be there. I appreciate the invitation. The schedule is such that it's impossible. But I think the summit that you're putting together and all the participants that are here today understand fully the importance of immigration reform, a comprehensive approach, and an approach that gets done this year. I am a firm believer that if we begin to talk about immigration reform in parts or in piecemeal, we will lose the opportunity for a more comprehensive and a more lasting approach to the immigration reform. I also believe that you cannot cherry pick what is good, politically palatable, and what is not politically palatable in terms of comprehensive immigration reform. So the task and the discussions and the dialogue today is vital to the national conversation. As you well know, part of the process up to this point in Congress has been insular. Discussions among the senators, discussions among House members, general parameters, some consensus around some issues, but the very fact remains that I think we need definition. We need to define path to citizenship. We need to define the criteria, and we need to define the length. I think those are points of contention, and those are points in which I believe we have to be very firm. If a path to citizenship is not part and parcel of an overall comprehensive immigration reform, and all we do is issue provisional status forever to the undocumented that will come forward and will earn that opportunity to get on a pathway to citizenship, then we've defeated the whole purpose. We've essentially creating a subclass of American residents without the ability or the hope to ever make their status fully protected and fully American. The other issue is one that I think there's consensus on, and that is to codify the DREAM Act into permanency and make it part of the package and make it part of permanent law. The issue is security as well. Some of my Republican colleagues, especially from the state of Arizona, are insisting that there has to be a robust, secure package in order to reach consensus on the other important items of immigration reform. And it appears that that's the direction in which some of the discussions are going. Being representing the border in Arizona, I can tell you that there has been as more harm than good as a consequence of an enforcement-only policy, and not knowing what triggers would be, not knowing what an independent commission authority would be, what powers they would have in terms of deciding when the rest of immigration reform goes forward. I agree with the president. Those are not tied together. Enforcement and a whole package of comprehensive reform for the people in this country, the 11 million, should not be tied to triggers and enforcement, triggers that have yet to be defined. And if there's going to be additional security, I think one of the essentials has to be transparency of that resource, audit of that resource that's going into border security. With that comes due process. With that comes the ability for people to seek redress on grievances, and those grievances be investigated and promptly dealt with, adjudicated, or whatever needs to be done. But so that there is an entry point into this enforcement and security agenda that brings the role of public opinion, the rule of law, and the transparency that we all want. If the heed is for enforcement only, it's more enforcement, then I think there's an obligation to also extend to that process the transparency and the due process that has to be essential to it, the review process and the oversight process. And family unification, essential, and how you discuss that, because the separation of families, I think, is what's taking the greatest toll, not only in our particular communities, the immigrant community, but also in the country as a whole. And so family unification, how that provision is structured, how we begin to unify families instead of separate them, and I think is an essential part of immigration reform and has to be that center spoke that rotates everything else. Those are some of my perspectives. You know, the borderland has been economically marginalized as a consequence, in a large measure, as a consequence of the security mission on the border. And so there has to be strategies to revitalize economies, increase the flow of goods and services, enhance the economic relationship and the cultural relationship and the historic relationship that Mexico and the United States have enjoyed. And that, I think, has to also, can't ignore the economic consequences that have happened and also the economic opportunity that's available under comprehensive immigration reform. There are issues abound in this, and this is one instance in which we have an opportunity. And that opportunity has happened because the community, Latino voters, overwhelmingly not only support immigration reform, but supported candidates and a president whose pledge is to move this agenda and move it now. And so this is not a time to kind of rest on political laurels or hope and pray something good happens. This is a serious time for involvement. This is a serious time to continue to advocate and press. And the end result is the greatest good for the greatest number of people. The end result should be extending the American dream and beginning the process of unification in our country. And the end result should be that we have a product in comprehensive immigration reform that effectively deals with this broken system that we have. I want to thank you for the invitation. I regret that I cannot be part of that legislative panel. The perspectives that I have on this issue have been born in the course of time. I grew up in the borderlands in Arizona. I'm a first-generation American. My dad came to this country as a bracero. And all those experiences lead me to one simple conclusion, that if this country is going to not strain and break its social fabric, if this country really truly wants to continue to be the greatest on earth, economically, socially, and ethically, then it is going to have to deal with this issue of immigration, deal with it in a fair, humane way. It can be done. We're going to hear the divisiveness. We're going to hear the same tired and rhetoric that we heard in the past. But the American public in general wants us to solve this, and the American public in general sees it as something that can be solved. Your discussions today, the outlines, the points that you bring is something that I welcome, and I know my colleagues that are working hard for comprehensive immigration reform in this Congress are going to welcome that. So thank you. Let me thank the Alliance and the Ethnic Studies Department at UC Riverside for the vision to have this summit and for the information and the talent that you brought together. And I look forward to your work. Thank you very much. And again, my regrets.